Hello and welcome to episode 365 of Scarves Around the Funnel, the podcast usually dedicated to Heart of Midlothian Football Club. Except this week, it's dedicated to just one man, a club legend, our hero, who 27 years ago gave Hearts supporters of a certain vintage the best weekends of our lives. I'm Mark Donaldson, and this week there's only two of us. Our special guest made his debut for the club he loves in March 1972 in a 2-2 draw at East Fife. A man who subsequently went on to captain the club he loves, play a total of 350 games for the club he loves, then manage the club he loves on two separate occasions. The first of which saw him mastermind a 2-1 win over Rangers on a sunny day in May 1998 as the Scottish Cup returned to Gorgie for the first time in 42 years. And it's fitting he's agreed to join us this week with two of his former clubs, Hearts and Falkirk, meeting at Tynecastle at the weekend. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome to Scarves Around the Funnel, Mr. Jim Jefferies. Jim, how are you?
I'm fine, Mark. Good to see you.
You too. Firstly, most importantly, how is the health after the heart attack, which was 6 years ago now last week?
Yeah, everything's fine. Never had a touch wood. I've never had a bad day or anything connected with that over the last since the incident happened. In fact, they give you a little spray, and I had to change it once because obviously it's out of date because I never used it. So that's a good sign. So we're yeah, the health is good at the moment. Touch wood.
When you look in the mirror, Jim, and you see what you see, and I think you look great, how does it make you feel given what you went through and where you are now? Has life changed at all?
Oh, well, a number of people have says to me, that they're looking forward to their next heart attack if that's the way you look when you come out. I remember, I think it was just about a week or 8 days. I was at Tynecastle after getting out of the hospital, and remember Tom Cowan had been at the game, and he had bumped into Billy Brown, and he said, "Oh, by the way, how's Jim? Is he fine? Is he out of the hospital yet?" He says, "Why don't you ask him? He's in the boardroom." And he came in, and he said he couldn't believe it. In fact, I think he went on the radio on the Saturday and mentioned it and says, "God, I'm looking forward to my first heart attack." If that's how you're thinking. So yeah, a lot of people have said that things have been always looking quite well. So touch wood, it continues.
I mulled over with myself whether to ask you this as a first question, but I thought, fuck it. You can take a joke. So, what's the better comeback? Hearts from 3-0 down to get a 3-0 draw at Derby County in your first game in charge in August 1995, or Jim Jefferies after being out for 4 minutes and 25 seconds following the heart attack?
Oh, well, I suppose that's a difficult question because obviously coming back was, and the funny thing was about coming back was most of the people, I believe, of the paramedics in the ambulance when it happened on my rush to the hospital were all, I think, favouring the Hibs side of things. And I thought, well, I've got no chance here, but no, they did a terrific job in getting me back. But that first game you mentioned, I was just down to meet the players, actually. I travelled down, and it was Eamon. Eamon was taking the team that day, and nothing to do with Eamon, but I just went in at half time and just more or less to listen and made a couple of comments on what I thought happened, and made a couple of changes to the team then, and says, "Look, do this, and I want you to do this and that." So right away, and then we got back to 3-3, which was off to a good start, even though I wasn't officially in charge. I was just down to watch. So, but the response after it with the supporters, they knew I was there, and they wouldn't leave until I had obviously given them a bit of a look at after the game. So yeah, a few years ago now, but certainly memories that you'll keep forever.
Oh, I'll never forget that. I was behind the goals. We got chased after the game by the Derby fans because if you remember, the baseball ground was in among the houses. That you
Right,
didn't need to
right,
worry about that. That
correct.
was a bit scary.
It was correct. It's funny how it just works out like because when I left Hearts and went to Bradford City, my first game, I went down to watch it. The first game was at Derby County but it was a
Wow.
new stadium.
Sure.
And the first person I met going in was Dave Mackay, who I
Oh,
knew well because obviously he's from Musselburgh and he's a relative and close friend of mine, Lennon Cassidy, and and he used to come when he was up in Musselburgh. He used to come along to the training, or because you see him out running, or would pass by him when he was out keeping fit. And this is long after he had finished football. He was just keeping himself fit. So it's amazing how that connection with the Hearts and then going to Derby's, because he obviously was at Derby County and still in that area. Went along to watch him when he was there that day. That was my first game unofficially in charge of
mhm.
the club.
So much to get through with Jim Jefferies. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since Jim Jefferies was a laddie, since the 1950s. But I'm allowed to say it because you're the special guest this week. Your mother, Helen, was a distant relative of Willie Bald. Were you always destined to be a Hearts fan?
Maybe it was just I knew my dad obviously, even though he didn't go to a lot of football matches, but that was a club that he followed. And basically, another thing was when I was a young kid, one of the reasons that clinched me being a Hearts fan was there was a local boy. I used to just go out on the little pitch that was in front of my house and just out there kicking a ball every day. And and this guy called Willie Reid, I'm sure his name was, and from Wallingford, and he came up and said he must have spoke to my mum and dad. He says, "Would Jim like to go to a game on the Saturday?" I'm pretty sure the first game that was a select. Actually, it used to have at the start of the season when Hibs and Hearts used to amalgamate. If it was at Tynecastle, it would be six Hearts players. If it was at Easter Road, there'd be six Hearts players. And it was playing Chelsea that day, and the stadium was packed. And I think I got lifted over the gates or the turnstiles at that time, and it was packed. And I think that was my first game, and that just convinced me that I was going to continue to be a Hearts player, just following my dad's footsteps as well.
Happens so often, doesn't it? I mean, it was my father that took me to my first game. Mum drove us there, but my mum's dad, Joseph Don, was the deputy head at Tynecastle High School, just
Yeah.
across behind the goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was always that there. He'd actually come from Leith Academy. He'd come from the dark side. He was always a Hearts fan as well.
Yeah.
And you played against my uncle, who was the goalkeeper for Dundee, Ali Donaldson.
Oh, Ali, big Ali, he was a good goalkeeper.
Aye,
Big,
aye.
big lad too as well. He was, I remember him well. Yeah. Did he not have a spell, or did he go up to Aberdeen for a?
He went to Falkirk. He played with
Oh,
Sir Alex Ferguson at Falkirk,
yeah.
and he had a season at Hibs. Jim,
That's
we tried, nearly disowned him.
yeah.
But but football's in the family. That's what it
Yeah.
is. And thankfully, I ended up with the maroon genes rather than the Dundee genes.
Yeah.
Although,
Yeah.
yeah, well, do you remember the opposition player who scored twice against Hearts on your debut at East Fife in March 1972? The clue is he later went on to become first team coach at Tynecastle.
And he played in these. Oh, Walter Borthwick.
Yes. Sadly, no longer with us,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No,
Walter scored
look at that.
twice. I've got the team here. Do you want to see if you can remember the team that you played in?
Well, the one of the boys I remember playing against was a guy, a real handful at the time. He's one of our best players. Was it George Dewar? Played white right on against me at that time when I made my debut at left back. I think it was George Dewar. Might might be wrong.
So you played left back that
Yes.
day. Can you like over the course of your Hearts playing career, how often were you there? How often were you right back? How often were you kind of centre back? What was the position you played the most?
Well, is it funny enough? As I started out in school football, that when Billy Brown was in there, we had a great school team that got to fine Scottish. Ali Brown went to West Brom. Billy and Alec Martin went to Hull City. And I was actually a centre forward in the school team. Scored a lot of goals there. And then when I played for Preston Pines YM, I was actually a midfield player. Um, they put me there, and that's where I played most of the time before Hearts picked me up. And I started away, came in as a midfield player. But when I was in just doing well, they converted me back to left back, and I played against a Scottish select team one night, and I was just a provisional signing at that time. And when I went and played, the first real game on Tynecastle was against a Scottish under-17 team, Alfie Cornell, and played. And I just one of those nights where I had a fantastic game, and I didn't even get allowed. John Harvey didn't even allow me to have a shower. He took me right in right away, and they wanted. My dad was there, and my uncle was there, and they brought them in, and he wanted me to sign a contract. I had to. It was amazing because when I got home, and tell my mum, she says, the Rangers manager at the time, Davy White, I think it was in the house trying to. He was at the game. He was trying to get the censure, but I was late getting back, and I think he left, and because I think my mum had told him that I think he signed for the Hearts, so there was no point. But that happened at that time. So I started the way as a left back, made my debut at left back, but through time, other managers seen. I used to play. I had a great spell with Alan Anderson playing at the back, and Willie Orman would play me in a back four, right-sided centre half. Bobby Seath was the one that changed me to play in midfield. So just obviously as the sort of defensive side of the thing, but occasionally I got a chance to go forward. So I played in a number of positions. Right back, I only played a couple of times at right back to stand in, but it was mostly left back, centre half, or midfield that I played most of my time. And I think it helps because when there's a lot of changes in man, I had about 7 or 8 managers, and I managed to obviously do something that was worth, because some managers are different. You just have to move on or be out in the play. But I played under a lot of games under most of them.
Do you remember the team, the lineup in your debut at East Fife? I've got it here if you don't.
No, I I know. I think it was Dewar was a white player. I might be wrong in that. George Dewar, I think he was an experienced man I had to play against that day. But
For Hearts, though, do you remember the Hearts team you played
for the
at?
Hearts team, oh, well, Crookie would be in goals, was he?
No, Garland.
Garland was in
Kenny
goal.
Garland was in goal.
Roy Kay would play.
Nope.
Roy, certainly Snedden, Ian
Ian
Snedden.
Snedden wore number 2,
Alan Anderson play.
wore number 5.
Um, who would play? Would Wilson be in
Wilson Wood.
midfield?
Wilson Wood wore number
He would
6.
play. Harry Kinnear definitely played.
Who's that? Harry Kinnear was number 10
Yeah,
because he scored.
he scored. That's right. I remember him scoring.
Who was the captain?
The captain would be Donald. Was it not Donald? Donald Ford?
Donald Ford played but wasn't the captain.
Captain. Who would be the captain there?
I think he went on to live in Australia.
Oh, Eddie Thompson. Eddie Thompson.
Eddie Thompson.
Eddie Thompson.
So we've got Garland, Snedden, Jefferies at 3, Thompson at 4, Wilson Wood at 6,
Yeah.
Donald Ford at 9, Harry Kinnear. Did you mention him? Yep,
Yeah,
you did. Number 10.
yes.
Who got the other goal?
Tommy Murray? No.
Tommy Murray wore 7.
7.
Sat on the ball at Ibrox.
That's right. And I think Tommy Traynor was away by then. With George Fleming, no?
Nope.
No. Be the left winger then, is it? Take it that we're missing.
Did you say Alan Anderson?
Said Alan Anderson, yes.
Alan Anderson, Wilson Wood, Tommy Murray, Donald Ford, Harry Kinnear. So we need number 8 and number 11.
Number 8. Would that be Jim Townsend?
It was Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, yeah.
And number 11, I assume he played out in the wing. He was an outside left from Glasgow.
Andy Lynch?
Andy Lynch. There you go. There's all our yesterdays.
Was it Andy?
It was. How would that team get on against the current Hearts team as far as ability is concerned?
Oh, they were a good team. Football was a lot different then. but they were a good, solid team, and great to play with, especially with Donald Ford and all them. They were terrific players, and it was and they were always there or thereabouts. It was maybe wasn't as much pressure as nowadays in winning, but because it was all about, Hearts had a style, a DNA, and then they were brought up with it. The bald worn cords, everything. So they really had to fill some big shoes there. But really great times, and a great bunch of players when I first went to the club.
Would you compare Donald Ford's style of football to anybody in the modern era, or was he just very, very different?
Donald, excuse me, Donald relied a lot on his pace. He was very quick, very sharp, and a very good finisher. That's why he got an international call up. He always used to play on the shoulders. We talk about centre forwards now, and you get some that do play on the shoulder and their assets getting in behind. And Donald was probably one of the early ones that thrived on that. And all you need to do was actually get the ball in behind the defenders, and you knew Donald was. I remember a game with fantastic, probably the hardest game I've ever played in. We drew, I think, with Ayr United at home in a Scottish Cup tie. I'm sure Alec Ferguson scored the equaliser. We had to go down to Ayr. It was a cup tie. They held the game up. I mean, there was something like 17,000, 18,000 people.
Wow.
Small Ayr, where we played that night, and they had a massive, big side. Fleming, Dixie Ingram up front, George McLean, Fleming at the back as well. Oh God, they were McInespy. Huge team and physical, really strong. And it was a roaring cup tie, went into extra time, and we won. We won 2-0, and Donald Ford scored both goals, both identical goals from, I think it was Rab Prentice that put in the two crosses. And it was the hardest game and the best game I've ever played in terms of the way that we got through and the excitement after the game, and on a very small ground that was packed and held up, as I say, for ages. So great memories there as well.
There's a wonderful website called londonhearts.com, and it's got all the details about everything. And it tells me in the first game, it was a quarter-final in March 1974. Johnny Graham's penalty gave Ayr United the lead in 19 minutes, and Alan Anderson equalised 10 minutes from time. So that replay you're telling me about, 16,185. It was 0-0 at full time. Donald Ford scores after 106. There's an equaliser. Ricky Fleming equalises after 112. And then Donald Ford scores again 3 minutes later.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah, you got the equaliser.
So more than 16,000. Cruikshank, Snedden, Clooney, Jefferies, Anderson, Brown, Aird, Ford, Busby, Stevenson, and Prentice, and Tommy Murray and Willie Gibson.
I didn't play left back that night. I played centre half with Alan Anderson.
With Alan. Clooney at left back, Snedden at right back.
That's right. That was it.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to modern day, when football's not as fun. It's not as great, VAR and all that bullshit. Let's preview Falkirk on Saturday, Falkirk Hearts, because they come to Tynecastle on Saturday for the first time in the top flight since February 2010. That's more than 15 years. That was also your first home game in charge of your second spell. It was also a first game in charge as the new Falkirk boss for Stephen Presley. Now, in the away dugout this weekend will be John McGlynn, another laddie from Wallingford. He first worked for you at Hearts as an under-16s coach in 1996. But how did your paths first cross?
Well, when I was a player at Hearts, it's a strange thing that, because when I used to get dropped off after training, I had to pass my old primary school. And one of the janitor at that time, Hugh Adams, he seen me watching the game with the school teams that I used to play in. Wallingford used to play against White Craig, Campy, the Borough, Pinky, old Musselburgh team. Billy used to play for Pinky and Alec Martin and that. And we had maybe there was about maybe 7 or 8 teams in that, and they played every Thursday. So when I was watching the game, the janitor pulled them over and he said, could you do us a favour? I says, what? He says, I know you've been coming to the games. Would you referee a game, you know? He said, it'd be a big lift for the boys, you know, because they know that you've signed for Hearts and everything like that. And I went that way with that day because that was just before that East Fife game, before I made my debut. And I went to tell him that I was playing the next day against East Fife. So anyway, he says, it'd be great if you could come in. So I says, okay. Now, while I was there refereeing some of the games, I enjoyed it, refereeing 2 or 3 games. And this is how strange it is, because throughout my life, probably one of the strengths was having an eye for a player. And even at that age, I spotted some players when maybe not just Wallingford, but 2 or 3 other clubs that played had good players. So I says to her, I says, why don't we start up a team? To the janitor, I says, why don't we start up a team, a young team, and play in? They used to have a Sunday league for under 14s or under 12s or something. I said, so some of these boys. So we went and tried to convince players from Pinky, the Borough, Loreto. John was from Loreto at the time, John McGlynn. And we formed a little team that played in that league that played on a Sunday. So that was my really first involvement in looking after when they're getting onto the coaching side. So we used to train once a week at Wallingford School, and we played on a Sunday. And John playing in that team, so he would only be 12, 13 at the time. And we had a really good side, played a lot of good football, and 5 of that team got signed up for senior. Wow. From that little forever picket. And John McGlynn went to Bolton Wanderers. So, he was down there for a few years and come back after that. And I think he was too old for our league and things. So, but we obviously kept in touch. And then he got the job at Musselburgh when Billy Brown came to help me. And then, so we used John to put players out there and that. And then eventually it just led to John to come in and look after the youth side, because he was doing really well at that level. And that's how it all started.
Amazing.
Amazing.
What have you made of the job that he's done in management, especially at Falkirk?
Fantastic. He's gone. I mean, at Wraith Rovers, I know, because I used to go over there a lot and speak to a lot of people that was there, and I loved them there because John just did. He's just a football fanatic. He just, it must be his wife must never see him, because John's always doing something. And even when it's not football, if in the close season they tell me that he used to go and do all the repairs round about the ground, and the stand, and if there was a new kitchen needed done or something, or something to do with it, because I think he was a plumber to trade, and he just couldn't stop working. He just loved it, and he's just a real top football man, and it's great to see him doing well, because prior to John, when John was young, he had an older brother that I used to go a lot out socially with, and his wife, who's recently had a bad time of it through an accident. But that's how I really got to know John first. But he's done a fantastic job wherever he's been. I know he was at Hearts, but he was at Hearts when Romanoff was there, and it was only a stopgap. And really, he did well. I mean, some of the results, he went down to Liverpool and got a draw and things like that. So, he was always, and he's right into everything. And I think he's a probably good manager as well.
So John ends up at Falkirk after serving his earlier apprenticeship at Hearts. You ended up at Hearts after 5 years at Falkirk. Let's talk about how that happened. You'd made your mind up to leave Brockville and come to Tynecastle, so you told Chris Robinson on the Friday that he'd got his man. So this is the Friday. That's correct up until now, isn't it?
Yes, and I made the mistake. Listen, I loved Falkirk. I had 5 great years there, and the success after going in and first few games didn't go so well, but everything was sorted out and everybody was sorting. And I got on great with it. I had a chair. David Holmes was a fantastic chairman. The owners that appointed him had bought the club over because they took me from Berwick. I don't think I was the most popular. And as soon as they appointed David, uh, David, what the second name was you get older, he was a terrific chairman. But because he was at Rangers,
David Holmes, yeah.
David Holmes. And as soon as he got in charge, everybody thought, well, names that were being branded about were Graham Roberts, Terry Butcher, and everything. And suddenly they've got Jim Jefferies from Berwick Rangers, So, and they all just told me that, the team had missed out on promotion and that, and they were good enough to get promoted with the right guidance. Didn't start well, didn't win a game for 6 weeks. I would bang to the stand with Billy for something we did at Berwick.
There's a shock.
Pelters, really. And the chairman was great because he called me in, because I think even the directors that were there were a bit not sure if I was the right man or not. David Holmes, came in and said, look, we need to have a chat. And I thought he was calling me in for maybe my time was up. And he said, tell me what your thoughts are. He says, because I'm going into this meeting and I know there's a few rumblings on the board. He says, but I want to talk to you first about what do you think is wrong here? What do you think of the team? You've been in 6 weeks. It's not went well. I says, well, they told me this team would be good enough for promotion. I says, personally, I think it's more chance of getting relegated. And he said, Then he said, what are you going to do about it? I says, I'll need to change it. He says, well, with no money. So anything you do from now on, if you convince me here tonight, if you're going to change it, how are you going to do it? And there was something in the paper for weeks about one of the players, not mentioned, but he had been the subject of paper articles about being ready to go to Leeds United for £250,000, which was massive money in that day, And I said, I've not had any offer, and if that's a chance to get money. He says, have you got any offers? I said, I think I can get £80,000 from Kilmarnock. And I've also got a player that I played against with Berwick Rangers. I says, he's not in the team an awful lot, but I think I like his tenacity in the middle of the park and all. So he says, so you get £80,000. He says, you can have every penny of that £80,000 to build the team. And you can do the deal. I says, you sure? Because there'll be a lot of people angry that we're selling this boy to Kilmarnock for just £80,000 when he's been quoted at 200, 250. Do it. And he took me into the meeting, told the rest of the board members, you can forget, Jim will be here, guaranteed to the end of the season, at least. And he's got a plan, and we're going to see it through. So I did the deal, and I ended up bringing in players, not using the money on transfer fees, but just trying to give them half decent wage, better than we were, not fortunes by any means. And we just tried to sell them the club and the vision that goes on. Players like Tommy McQueen, Alec Taylor, Simon Stainrod. We adjusted one or two boys that were there at the team. We let a few go, and we built a great team there. But after the key to the whole thing was we had a big game at 2 games. Dundee and Airdrie were our 2 teams to compete to get promoted, and we were a wee bit behind them with the start we made. And it was at Dundee when I brought in Alec Taylor, used to be at Dundee United, and he was at Walsall. I managed to get him up. He made his debut that day. We were winning 2-1 when the mist came in. It was all foggy and everything. We were back to start, and Billy Dodd scored well in extra time, made it 2-2. But it was a great result. Team looked good. Went next week to play the league leaders, and famous hat-trick by Sammy McGivern. We beat them 3-0. And we went on a 17-game unbeaten run. and we ended up winning the title in our first year after a
Wow.
terrific start. Okay, when you have a good team, you lose players, clubs come and take them, and you've got to start. And we had a great season, got a standing lease, even though we stayed in the league the first year, I think, then got relegated. And then right away, the following season, we
Came
had a
back.
battle with Dunfermline, and we had to get a point at Clydebank on a day, and the team played great. Davy Weir played that day, sent the crossover for Mickey Henderson to put us in front. George was unlucky not to get a hat trick. He hit the bar about 3 times with headers, but we got the result, and that was promotion again. And had 5 years to give up. It was very difficult, given that my dad says to me, "I think you'll have a job for life there," which is unusual in
Mm.
football. But of course, I did say to my ambition was always to be to get a chance to manage at Hearts, and the mistake I made was I went to the ground to tell George Fulston my answer. I thought I owe him that at least, rather than my phone call. But he had brought loads of kids and supporters down, and they were there, and the pressure was ranked up. And then some things were said that put me under a wee bit more pressure of the club's future, about new stadium and everything, all hinged on me staying. And I just had enough of it. Just right, let's just stay and we'll get on with it. And that, but Chris, to be fair, he wouldn't take no for an answer. He phoned me up after it. He says his mother-in-law had phoned and said that Jim, he looks like a zombie being interviewed after the game. He looks like he's just away with it, And so he phoned me and we sorted it out on the Sunday. And he says you might get a bit of stick for a few days, but he said, which I did. But it was done, and thankfully it all just worked out fine in the end.
So that is a condensed and abridged version. Your cause, I think, was helped, weirdly enough, in May 1993 when Falkirk beat Hearts by 6 goals to nil. And that was around the time Chris Robinson, Leslie Deans were contemplating perhaps offering to buy the football club from Wallace Mercer, which happened in 1994. But they were well aware that you were capable, and they were well aware, especially Chris, that it was a job that you fancied. So you did have the discussion on the Friday. You said it was a job that you wanted, and you said you wanted to be Hearts manager. Now, you've already spoken about what happened on the Saturday with George Fulston. I'm going to take you back to the Friday night. Talk to me about this carload of Hearts supporters from Gore Bridge who drove down to Lauder that night and said, Jim, you're the man to get it right, please. What was that all
Just,
about?
just when you mentioned there about Chris, you're right. Chris had left. Chris had said to me that I was in the frame before Tommy McGlynn at Motherwell, but he went for a more experienced manager. I could understand taking over the club. But he says when he left that day at 6-0 at Falkirk, that was the day they decided to go ahead and try and get a grip of the club. He says, and I think after Tommy obviously left, I was due to get the job. But yes, you're right. When it all came out, and there was tip-offs and everything that I was about to turn it down, uh, I had this lad come to my door, chat my door, and there was the car outside. It was full, and it was. He says he was a big Hearts fan, and praying nearly on his knees, begging me to come to the club. And I says to him, "Well, I says that, I've made the decision and I'll come in." Oh, they were delirious. I mean, they were just unbelievable. Just they wouldn't. I don't think he would have left unless I'd said yes, I'm taking the job, and that's how much they were desperate to, or the fan, or his family and friends were desperate to get a hold of us. So yeah, I'll remember that. And I've bumped into him a few times.
Oh, you have? I was going
He
to ask you
always
about
brings
that.
it up. He's mentioned it a couple of times, and because as I say, we all get a bit older, and sometimes I know you. I'm the one that knocked your door from for Gore Bridge. You see, I thought it was. So we had some
Brilliant.
great laughs at some events about that night.
So I wonder how he's feeling. And is he feeling the same way as Billy Brown was when Billy found out, despite the fact you told him you're going to Hearts on the Saturday night, it's like, no, no, I'm staying. I'm staying at Falkirk. And Billy and the guy from Gore Bridge and everyone else is like, hold on a minute. Did you know when you said you were staying, you'd made the wrong decision?
Well, it was a listen. I'm not George Fulston. I got on well with, and I don't have a bad word to say about George Fulston. George Fulston, even though he was a different type of character to a lot of people that work in the football, he just had his own way. But George, you can't blame him. He tried his hardest to keep me at
Sure.
Falkirk. He knew how important it was to stay. There was a bit of emotional blackmail, which, as I say, I'm a young manager. That was my first full-time job at the club, and had some great times. And everybody, as I said, it was just a pleasure to be there at the time. And we built some great teams with some great players. They all enjoyed it. Had a bit of success. We had victories at Ibrox, beating Celtic at Hampden. You just think it's a crazy world where we club like Falkirk and Brockville that we did fantastic. So all that was difficult to give up in a way, even though I wanted to be the Hearts manager and I'm a Hearts man as a player. So it was one of those toughest decisions. And when George wasn't feeling too great, and one of the directors says he's not been well this morning because of the news that you're going to Hearts and all that. I just got a bit of that. I suffered a bit of pressure for 2 or 3 days and just wanted it to end and not just end in terms of being resolved. And I just said, he got me at the right time emotionally, I think.
Right.
But
yeah.
when I went back, I got the call. I think it was on the news. Martin Dempster interviewed me after the game, after the meeting, and he said that he couldn't believe it. And as I say, when I got home, I got the phone call. What the hell happened? What done this, did that? I says, well, I've made the decision now. And he says, well, do you still want to be manager at Hearts? And I said, yeah, but I can't now. I'm scared. He says, do you want to be manager at Hearts? So I had to meet him on this. I says, why? He says, well, we'll meet tomorrow. And we met on the Sunday and went along. He had some PR people there that explained about how they were going to put it across and how it was going to be dealt with. And he says, you'll get a bit of stick in a few days, but as we all would say, it will be fish and chip paper.
Sure.
After once we settled in. So glad it was all over. It was entirely a mistake I made that I went to Falkirk and allowed myself to be that people would have to be in that position to understand why. And I think it showed a great respect to Falkirk that, it's no comparison being manager of Falkirk to managing Hearts. And I mean that in a sense of the size of clubs, and the progress. But they gave me what the biggest thing I've had, or one of the most things I've cherished, is top of a few good managers, Falkirk, even for after what all happened, I was voted their manager of the millennium.
Wow.
Some about within the year, I think to go in there. So it was quite an honour after being 2 or 3 years at Hearts, to get that award in front of people like Alec Totten and that who did a fantastic job for and some other good Wally Cunningham and all these people, So very privileged to get that honour.
You spoke about it was on the news. Martin in interviews, it was also on the news. It was Chris Robinson's mother-in-law that
Yes.
was watching TV that night that was like, hold up, because Chris had told his mother-in-law, Jim's coming to Hearts. So his mother-in-law saw this, was like, Jim's staying at Falkirk. He said, "What?" She's phoned Chris. Chris is at a wedding. And then Chris has come out of the wedding and said, I don't care who's getting married. I'm going to call you. So you've said what was said, and you've said it well. Before you met him on the Sunday night, you kept your word to a pal or a business cohort. You played in a golf outing on the Sunday.
Yeah, when
How was
Chris,
your...
well, Chris
Uh,
asked me, sorry, go on, Mark, go on.
no, you tell me this first, and then I'll ask you how your golf game was, because that's not
Well,
as important as
well,
what
what
Chris
happened
said.
was, Chris says, we meet tomorrow. He says, what time? And I says, well, look, I'm committed to playing in a team event at golf at Brumenau Golf Course, and a friend of mine. So I said, I've got to do that. He says, well, what time's it finish? He says, jump in the car and go, come to the house after it. So I'll set it up for after it. I said, okay. So when I got to here's the guy I'm playing, because it's all, by this time, it's all broke out
Yeah.
in news. So I had him and actually an ex-player at Berwick, Lindsay Muir, who was playing in the same event. They had all seen me coming in. So everybody, of course, come, what the hell's happened, you know? What's going on? And the pal that I was playing with, it says, you off your head or something, you know? He says, what the hell's going on? And then I just says, listen, all I said to him was, it's not finished yet. What? He says, I says, it's not finished yet. And he's saying, so everything was a silence. I says, but I can't stay after the golf. I've got to go. He says, so they're going like this, they're rubbing their hands, you know. So it was just one of these unbelievable situations. And then, of course, I left there, went to Chris's house. He had a couple of chaps there who explained everything, how they were going to go about getting this as best they can to save face a little bit. But I had to go through it and that way. But the bottom line is that was my decision before I went to Falkirk, that I was going to Hearts. I just allowed myself to be changed because the respect and love I had for Falkirk at the time, that it got to me a wee bit.
A little birdie told me if you didn't have the people in your four ball tidying up after you because you were forgetting clubs because your head was all
Oh,
over the place, you would have ended up about 5 clubs in your bag.
the worst game of golf I've ever played. I never concentrated on it. It didn't help the team any. It was just concentrating all on what was on the thing. It was funny how Chris Robinson said long after it to me one time, and let's say one of the things that pursued them after the interview that I had was they asked me a question about why Hearts. I mean, before I went, they were nearly relegated. I think they survived the last 2 years prior to that with the last game of the season and staying in the Premier League. So they were asking about, because I used to go to games on, business, watching games against opponents that they're playing. I used to take my son, who was very young at that time, to watch the game if it was a Sunday and everything like that, because he's a Hearts man as well. So I said, he said, it was something you said at the interview that, because they asked me what I thought was wrong. Well, my personal opinion with the club not struggling in the last few years. I says, well, no disrespect, I says, because I think you've had a great spell here with good players, and big heroes to a lot of fans. But you've had 5 managers in 10 years since '86 and haven't won anything. You've had very bad luck at times, these players, last minute goals, mistakes, bad decisions or something. And it was just, but the same players, can't go on forever. And it was 5 good, I think. I even said to him, I says, 5 managers, if you look at them, they're not bad managers, they've all been successful, but it's no worked out. And I think it needs to change. It's as simple as that. It needs to change, and I'll change it. I'll be fair at the start and see what I can get out of it. But the day when we got beat at Falkirk, would you believe it or not, 2-1, that was the day where we really said to the players, no money, going to change it next week, but not be in for one game. That's it. Because if I don't change it, I'll never know.
Yeah.
And the one thing they can say, at least I tried. And that's because we haven't got the money, because I think the owners and the board at that time had spent all their money trying to get control of the club, that they didn't have anything to take. So we just had to use what I did before, since that school days, as I was telling you about, where you had an eye for a player, like I did at Berwick, built a team at Falkirk, I built 2 teams there that gone on to be success, and it was time to do it at Hearts, and I used a lot of players that I didn't think were, we could better, and used them as swap deals and little bits of money that I picked up here and there, but very little. But
You're like a footballing Del Boy.
a bit like that, yeah. It was just a case of, if you've got a good eye for a player, you should use it. And a lot of these players went on to go and play at bigger level, international level, with good success. Enjoyed Billy and I's way that we did things. So no, we really, and that team, that we started to build, were a great team. But again, when it came to the stage, not long after that, they're going to attract attention. The Mickey Cameron's going south, even though he was out for a long time the year after that with a bad injury. But we still got through it, and we were doing fine. But it's unfortunate the way we parted, because obviously it was not out of my control, or something happened between at the board level that I got caught in the middle of, and it was just the time to say, well, that's fine. It's better. I don't want to be caught in the middle of it. Some are saying one thing, some are saying the other. It's best if we just part the ways.
You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering sign and print solutions since Jim Jefferies was a laddie. And that will do us for part one of episode 365 with the former Hearts boss, Jim Jefferies. When he agreed to do this, he asked how long is it going to be. I said about an hour. No chance. We've ended up with a trilogy, and thank you for listening to part one. Part two will be available shortly and will include his first spell in charge as Hearts manager from 1995 until 2000, and also the small matter of a Scottish Cup win as the trophy returned to Gorgie for the first time in 42 years. That's part two. And later on in part three, we'll look at Jim's second spell and charge as manager of Hearts under Vladimir Romanov. But for part one, that'll do us. And we'll see you again for part two.